Hello and welcome to The Whistleblower. This is the program for the water polo community that focuses largely on refereeing, but also other things of interest in the game, especially in these difficult times where we don't get much of a glimpse of our favourite sport. My name is Ian Trent, and joining me is today's super brilliant panel. Firstly, from Bondi Beach, the Australian Water Polo Referees Director and the former FINA referee, Phil Bauer. G'day, Phil.
Hello, Ian. Good to be here tonight. Really looking forward to the show.
He's in a good mood because the Roosters are doing well. West Coast Eagles not doing so good. Over there in Perth, it's Paul Oberman, the Australian men's team assistant coach and head coach of WACE. Good evening, Paul.
Hi, Minnie. How are you?
Good. Happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Spent it out watching under-8s AFL football in the rain and wind.
Would have been riveting. Okay,
Yes.
Former Australian men's team coach and, of course, the current under-20 men's coach is John Fox, and he joins us from Canberra. Hi, John.
Good evening, Ian, and great to be back on, this time as a panellist. It's
great to have a fellow bomber on this week too, even though the team is not going all that well. And from Melbourne, we can see him. He's not in Collingwood colours for a good reason. Arguably Australia's best referee and certainly most credentialed, Danny Flav. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Minnie. Thank you very much. Yeah, no Collingwood today, unfortunately, for our loss. So it's back in the wash.
Never mind. We're
next week.
Very, very all over the country today. It's fantastic, and really looking forward to meeting our very special guest shortly, the Australian men's team captain, Aaron Younger. Now, if you've got any questions for Aaron or any of the boys, particularly Danny and Phil for the refereeing angle of it coming up very shortly, just have a look at the bottom of your screen for the Q&A tab there. If you press that, you'll be able to type your questions. We will do our very best to answer them. Now, any feedback you might have on the show, whether it's good or bad, we love to hear it all. The address, whistleblowerpolo@gmail.com. That's the email address, and our Instagram account address, whistleblowerpolo, hashtag who is TWB, the whistleblower. So any feedback you can give us, we'd love to hear from you. And don't forget those questions, they're instantaneous and we'd love to answer them for you. Right now, let's get on with the show. And it is game time with Danny Flav. Now, let's see if we can get a video up now. Dan, we're looking at penalty situations.
Yep, going over, just rehashing what we spoke about in one of the earlier episodes.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Ready, Mr. Music? And our first video is coming up very shortly. Here we go. It'll come up when we least expect it, won't it, Danny?
Danny, when you talk about them, we're going to change a little bit of what we said in the first episode, correct?
Yeah, we're sort of been talking through the TWPC and their instructions of how we're supposed to go about the penalty, and they want us now to play the advantage to hopefully for the attacking player to get the shot away instead of playing the penalty too quickly. It's a really hard one to explain because it comes down to a point that if we play the advantage and they do get fouled, where we could call a penalty, but we give the advantage and they miss the shot, we can't call it back. So it's done. Okay.
Looking good here. Take us through it, Danny.
Okay, so from the left-hand catch, the cross pass to the attacking player who's actually inside, so he's inside water, so he's got the break. The girl fouls her from behind, touches her arm. Her whole body is on the back of the attacking player. So this one is no doubt it's a penalty all the way. Even though the shot never looked like it was going to go in, the reason why it wasn't going in was because she was fouled from behind when she caught the ball. So that's a bread and butter everyday penalty.
Situation number two.
Okay, this is the great defence from the centre back there. So the first centre back's the attacking player's turned inside here. She's got both hands up, not fouling whatsoever. But the second player coming in hits the attacking player on the hand, and this has to be a penalty. It was no call in this situation, and as you can see, the player complaining. But that was 100% a penalty from the second defender. That the first defender, the centre back, great defence, hands up, showing the ref that she wasn't holding whatsoever, until the second defender come in. Yep, ball up, inside the cage, no other defenders around from a probable goal. That's a penalty.
Danny, can we just get some clarification on, there's an advantage rule, and if she had have got the shot away, it's no penalty. But because she didn't get the shot away and the ball was hit and the defender has knocked her hand and knocked the ball out
as she was shooting. Yeah. So
okay.
As I said, from the instructions from TWPC, they want to see the goal scored. Okay, so they want the attacking players to score the goal. They don't want the referees to interfere with it. So if they get the shot away and it's a bad shot, well then that's just unfortunate. So,
yep.
But some of the good referees can actually see that the shot's not going to be a goal, and they can call it at the split second. And they can call the penalty at the same time. But the problem with that is, if we get it wrong and they score the goal, the penalty still stands and they may miss. So it's a catch-22. But yes, they want us to play the advantage.
I think it's really good there. If we can have that again, look at the refereeing positioning there, right up the top of the screen. They're actually inside the 2 metres. So they're trying to see the best view that they can of that incident, even though they might have got it wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's really important for the younger referees as well.
You must stand in a correct position where you can see all what's going on. So if it means that you must go inside the 2 metres, even down to the goal line where you get a better view, then so be it. It's nothing worse for a referee to be standing in a blind position and they miss the action, or they miss the goal or the penalty foul. So the movement of the referee, forward, backwards, to get the clear view is the best movement they can do. This is a clear cut, this one. The second defender actually grabs her and interferes with what she's trying to shoot, and the ball just goes straight down. So yeah, that's a penalty every day of the week.
It's very similar to the Joe Kays one, which we've had on about by every episode so far, the no call.
Yeah,
you know, and this is what we got.
Sorry, Phil.
We've got to be very careful of it. You know, if the person is fouled from behind and it prevents the shot,
yep.
Right? For my mind, if it prevents a good shot, you should be calling the penalty.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but once again, as I said, if we play the advantage and they get a good shot away, even though they were fouled, we've got to remember that we can't call it back.
Yeah. Now, everyone that's watching, your state now has a 10-minute clip of the TWPC meeting at World League in 2019. So they should be sending that. Oh, if you want to see it, it's just a matter of asking your state, and they have the capabilities of sending it to you. And in 10 minutes, they explain it pretty well, what's a penalty and what's not a penalty.
And can I, before we go to the third clip, can I ask Foxy and Paul, as both coaches, and for yourself, that's the second clip we've seen where I'm saying it's 100% penalty. As coaches, would you expect that referee to call a penalty?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Danny, I'll fire one back at you though. As a referee, do you prefer to have this style, or do you want it more black and white?
I think if it's the black and white, the clearer it is, the easier it is. Because now we can always say, you know, if a referee does a bad call, we can say, oh, I was playing advantage. You know, so you've taken the easy way out. You've taken the easy option, saying, oh, I gave an advantage. They miss. Well, no. I think that if you're in front and you're fouled from behind, and there's no other defender around, only the goalie to beat, then it's a penalty. But the instructions from TWPC are, we're given the advantage. I think if you're a good enough referee, as I said earlier, you can pretty much tell that's going to miss the goal, and you can call it at that same time.
I think the main problem when they write the interpretations, they write them for Champions League, for Olympic Games. They write them for very, very competent referees in the most part. And that is very hard to bring back to junior competitions, to inexperienced referees and try to explain them. It's something you learn with experience, but it's for the players and everyone else. It's to do with ability. And I would find it very hard to let a 14-year-old get in front and give him advantage. I'd be blowing the penalty probably straight away.
Yeah. Well, if they're fouled, and because they want to score a goal, so if they're fouled, then you play the penalty. As you said, it's different rules for different standards, I suppose you would say.
I suppose it was going to take
a bit of learning curve. It's all experience.
Yeah, boys, it was going to take a little bit of time to sift your way through all of this, but there's been a lot of confusion that suddenly we're changing again. What happened in Europe to make all this, come about?
Yeah, we're not really changing. Look, the instructions were there. It was hard. Look, they just decided that we need to play advantage a bit more because we were calling the penalties early, and they wanted to see the players actually try and score a goal, not the referee as such, as we would say, interfering with it and calling a penalty. So they want to see the attacking players score the goals.
So the next major tournament is 2021 Olympics. We've got to play this until then. See what happens at the 2021 Olympics. They can't change rules then, but they can modify interpretations. So, who knows what's going to happen. I know various members of our panel don't necessarily agree with the interpretation, but, that's what we're getting from TWPC, and that's the way we must go.
Instructions have been handed down. That's what we've got to follow.
Okay, we're ready for penalty situation number 3. Here it goes.
Okay, that's once again 100% penalty. A great cross pass. The guy grabbed on the arm before the ball comes there, interferes with him. And even though the guy coming in from behind as well, again, after that, sinking him, that's also a quite clear-cut penalty.
And it's also, Danny, there are 2 players there, but the point is neither are between the attacker and the goal.
The point is both defenders are behind. Both defenders behind the attacking player. So there's your first tick. Second tick, good pass, no problems at all. Fouled from behind and then sunk, penalty called. And that one, they did call a penalty. So that was a good call by the ref. And actually, it's a very easy one for referee to call. You don't want to miss those ones.
Pretty clear cut.
Pretty clear cut, yeah. Both defenders behind. So there's no defender in front or to the side. They're both behind. It's a good pass. As we said, you don't reward a bad pass. It's hit him on the hand. He's then fouled from behind, which interfered with the shot. Penalty.
Okay, any other comments? We're all clear. That was pretty clear cut.
Very clear cut.
Okay, gentlemen, that is our rules segment for the week. Pretty interesting once again. Let's now go to the one we've really been waiting for. Not that I don't like the rules. I love the rules, Danny. But our special guest today comes to us all the way from Budapest in Hungary, and he's the Australian men's team captain, Aaron Younger. Click that button, Aaron, and away you go. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
There you are. Fantastic. How are you getting through this COVID-19 situation in Budapest?
Oh, not too bad, to be honest. We were training most of the time, and up until the season being cancelled, we had actually continued training because we got a private complex. So my holiday's only just begun realistically, but I've got a nice 6 to 8 weeks off, which I'll be using wisely because it's been a long time since I've had a break like that.
Okay, Phil.
Yeah, Aaron, great to have you here. I've looked up a lot of things about you, and I've talked to people about you because I don't know a lot about you. And I've listened to a podcast where AJ was on, who rated you in the top 5 players in the world. And then I was in a meeting where Elvis came out and said exactly the same thing. And he said, you're in the top 5 players because you're so versatile. But I don't think a lot of people know a lot about you. And, you know, you're not in Australia a lot now. Tell us how you got to Hungary, where you started, and what we can do as Australians to know more about, well, all our players, but especially you.
Oh, it's a relatively complex one of how to get the name and the popularity out there a bit more. But I started at a very young age down at Picton Bars for the Fremantle Mariners kind of feeder club. And at around 18, I moved to Hungary. I was able to get a professional contract, a very small one, I must say. But I was able to move when I was around 18 after a World Juniors to go play in Hungary, and kind of took the opportunity as a opportunity to grow and develop my game. It wasn't a professional move or anything. It was just a move in development. And from there, I spent I spent 3 years in that first club. Then I had a year at home, and then I've been back over in Europe for another 6 years now. So it's been quite a long time in Europe. I played 1 year in Dubrovnik, 3 years in Szeged, 3 years in Szolnok, and this was my second year in Budapest. So I'm about to move to Italy now. As to how to get more people following and back home, that I think we've kind of have missed an opportunity in the past. I don't think with today's modern technology and how streaming and all the social media works that there's an excuse for kind of geographical locations. I mean, every single Champions League game we have is live streams. The last Champions League finals we had, every single game was live streamed. And of the 2 favourite teams, one team Joe Kayers was playing and the other team I was playing with, they were the 2 favourite teams to win the tournament. And during that final series, there was really kind of no following or media back in Australia to try and actually get some younger kids in the, Australian community involved in that, which was probably a missed opportunity. But moving forward, that would be the kind of things we'd be looking at, trying to get the kids viewing these overseas games. It's easy with modern technology to get involved, and it's just actually sharing that information and allowing the kids to watch these kind of games and watch the players, even the players back in Sydney, getting more kids down to watch the Richie Campbells, the AJ Roaches, and getting them involved and giving them a role model to look up to and a pathway to get there.
Yeah, I've got one more question, and I'm just going to leave it to the others and I'm going to listen. Explain to the viewers what competitions you play in and what they are, like Champions League and then a local comp, am I correct?
Yeah, well, the last 3 years we've been playing, we have the Hungarian Cup, which is like a small knockout competition. Oh, not small, it's a knockout competition. So it's the same as a league, just it's a knockout variation. So as you're going, you're just crossing over teams and slowly knocking them out for a cup, which finishes at the end of the year, which is halfway through the season. We've had the European Super Cup, but that's just because of the teams I've been playing in, which is the winner of the European Champions League versus the winner of the Len League Cup. Then you've got the Hungarian League, which is the entire season long, which is a kind of round robin setup. And then you have the final series, just like any kind of rugby or football setup. And then at the end, there's also the Champions League, which runs throughout the season. And then at the end, there's a final 8 competition, which is 3 games in 3 days in a knockout style.
Yeah, Aaron, you as has been said, you're widely recognised around the world as one of the best players. FINA had a meeting, I think it was last year. You attended as one of the voices of the athletes, and similar to what Phil spoke about, you said that the water polo is in a pretty good shape, but it was lacking in promotion. What's the difference that you see, when you come back to a game here in Australia? I mean, we sort of see a bit of a sausage sizzle and those sorts of things, and that's sort of promoting the game. But what's the difference that you see in Europe compared to, here in Australia? And what do we need to do better?
To be honest, probably the actual promotion of European water polo has got worse. I think they've actually been lucky that there has been quite a big following historically, but I think the numbers of actual attendees coming to games, that has dropped off a bit with the competitions. Now the Serbian league's really struggling, the Croatian league is financially struggling a bit, especially in the current situation. So the biggest luck here has been the broadcasting of the sport. Every country with their national league will have a broadcaster which broadcasts the important games. Also the Champions League now, under the new structure, every single Champions League game needs to be either broadcasted on TV and also with a live stream possible to watch worldwide. So I think that's probably the biggest difference in promotion, is that you can actually follow the games online. There's always live statistics, panels where you can watch and see the results of your teams and also the statistics, but you can also watch the games. Whereas in Australia, the opportunity only exists if you attend the game privately. But I think Australia does have the great opportunity that we do play in the summer, which Europe, they only play in the winter. The international season is in the summer, and that's when they do get the bigger crowds, when they can play outside. So I'm not sure what we need to replicate. It's obviously hard to build a history around the sport when there's so many other strong sports like rugby and football, but I think Australia's going in the right direction to make more of an event and to make it more social, that there is stuff to do outside of the game and you do go down there to socialise and enjoy. And water polo is a great place to do that. You've got great venues like Drummoyne, Fremantle, where you can go down, sit on the river, have a drink and watch a good game of water polo. And I think that's what we need to do, get people there. And after a while, you just get people hanging on and there'll be a lot more people retained in the sport that way.
Aaron, afternoon there, is it? About 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
Around lunchtime.
Yeah. And summer, much warmer than here at the moment. Nice.
Yeah,
you mentioned about the promotion, but one big difference that I really pick up on is the amount of games that you play. And Phil asked the question, how many different competitions that you're in. But you do play a lot of games. Generally, what would you average, 2 a week, probably?
Yeah, I think last year with the club, we played around 70 plus games with everything, with the cup, the league, the Champions League, which is pretty grueling after a while, but
yeah,
9 months.
I see a big difference between what you get in Europe and what's available in Europe compared to what we have in Australia, where we have our Australian Water Polo League, the National League. But beyond that, it's just state competitions, which probably aren't, except for maybe New South Wales, aren't the highest calibre of competitions. So do you think we're at a disadvantage there with the structure of our competitions, and how could we improve that for our players?
It's definitely a hard one to improve, just geographically in Australia. Obviously, there's such a big difference between, travelling from Perth to Sydney, you're on a 4.5 hour flight, whereas in Hungary, I'm based in Budapest, and the longest we need to travel is 2 hours on the bus to get to any city in Hungary for the National League. So providing a long-term National League with a round-robin structure is a lot more viable, that people can afford just to get a team bus and go down there, where it's not really a luxury we have in Australia, especially with the financial situation of water polo, where we can't have a team travelling from Perth to Sydney to Melbourne to Queensland, also with everyone working. But it definitely doesn't help that we do play a 3-month season, and for the rest of the 9 months, people kind of forget about the sport. So I don't know what the solution is to bring more high-grade water polo. I guess that's where it would be good to lift the level across the board, to lift up the level of that state competition and have the state competition as a feeder to people who come down and watch the national leagues. But it's a hard one to solve realistically. It's expensive and it's a big task, but I think a big part of it would be making those state leagues more competitive and having a bigger following of the state leagues. And obviously that's going to feed into the popularity of the national leagues when they do come around.
Do you think there'd be opportunities to bring more European teams out? So if, for example, Pro Reco or any of the Hungarian teams to actually do a tour around Australia and play some of these National League teams, similar to what other sports do. Soccer certainly do it, basketball.
Yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity. The only issue is, as we just mentioned before, they do play a lot of games here. I think it's around, Pro Reco is probably a bit less just because of the way the structure of their tournaments, but they're playing 60, 70 games. And then in that break period, which isn't really a break period over the European summer, that's when they go to the national team. So it's quite a tough thing fitting in the actual calendar of the events. But I think if it's planned with enough foresight, usually they're able to restructure the calendar to get those teams over. Obviously, we've had tournaments in the past, like your Tom Ode Cups, your World Club Challenge, and those kind of events, Water Polo by the Sea, where we have been able to bring over great teams. Even this well, summer in Australia, we were able to get Croatia and America over, and I think they were greatly popular. It's just a matter of planning and having the foresight to actually make those invitations a long time prior to the event, so the necessary plans can be made.
Aaron, got a question from our audience. Hi, Aaron. Do you think the Australian Water Polo League, and I know you haven't played in it for a while, could ever draw the big fish of European water polo to play here and on a regular basis? Or are we off the pace financially and or sport club size here in Australia?
I think definitely there's the ability to draw the talent out, especially with the more older retiring European players that have finished with the national team and they're looking to settle down their family. That obviously the Australian League is during the European winter, and I think a lot of Europeans would be happy to come out with their families and just spend 3-4 months in Australia to enjoy themselves realistically and enjoy being in Australia. It's a great country to be in. That would obviously be the draw card, and I think using that period when you do bring the Europeans out there, just to use them and leverage them as much as possible to develop our kids and get them involved in the league. They might not be at the peak of their careers or whatever, but there is definitely a lot of European players that are close to retirement that would be interested in coming over, and I think it's something that probably clubs haven't looked into as much. They maybe haven't. I mean, people like me, myself, I would be happy to introduce clubs to players retiring and that kind of thing. It's more of a approaching these kind of people rather than waiting for them to approach you.
Can we afford them?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's realistic within most teams' budgets. I don't think they would be expecting much, even just to work over here and have some sort of working holiday for the National League period, which isn't actually that long. So it's, I think, definitely reasonable.
All right. What do you got,
Aaron,
Danny?
Oh, go on. Danny?
So, Aaron, last year we had a training camp in Budapest before the World Champs. On Margaret Island, we were playing a game against the Hungarian team. And then after the game finished, of course, on Margaret Island, there was a heap of spectators just watching a training game, everyone standing around cheering and clapping and carrying on. And when after 6 quarters, the game finished, and while you were out warming down, just chatting with players, children come up and ask you, out of all the Hungarian players and Australian players, these young kids come up to you and ask you for your autograph. Is that a bit surreal? Now, would that happen in Australia, do you think?
I mean, obviously, when we had those events over the Christmas period, I think there was quite a few young juniors involved in trying to get involved in that, and that was probably a very good promotion for the sport that we were able to bring all those young kids, especially after the club challenge, that we were able to get America over there and get all those young kids watching. But usually outside of some opportunity like that, it'd be pretty irregular to have something like that in Australia. So it is quite a surreal experience that over here it does get that kind of popularity where there is kids and people, I mean, supporting the sport and following the players like you. So it is, definitely a nice feeling.
Just touching on the juniors and those sorts of things over in Europe, Aaron, you probably have a good idea of the system and how the athletes come through. What does it look like for a junior in Hungary? When he's starting out, and I know they have lots of similar, not always the same club they play for at the beginning of their career. They play for at the National League level. What's their junior structure like?
It's a bit different to us. It's pretty much all club-based. There's no such thing as an institute here. So it's pretty much you work with your clubs, and then you'll be involved in the, say, under 16, under 18, under 20, and then open national team. And they will have, because it's a relatively geographically small country, they're able to meet quite often, especially at those young age groups. I know with the 16s, 18s, 20s, they quite often meet once a month, and we'll have small training camps. But generally, most of the development is done through your clubs, and it's, I think, a pride here for the clubs that they've developed these players, and these players end up being Olympians or they're in the national team. And it's something a lot of them do advertise and do wear with pride, that they've got this many players in the national team, and we've developed a team that won the Hungarian League with 6 of our own players, and we've only needed to import so many players. So it's a different structure where there is a lot of pride and respect in developing your own players, and the clubs actually do aim and strive to do that. So it's a different structure that you don't have the institutes to go to, but their clubs are probably more professionally based, that they have a more vested interest in developing the players.
And also with those national teams, they have many, I mean, obviously Europe being so small, you know, compared to Australia, many tournaments to attend and European championships and those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, their calendar's pretty packed from a young age. It seems like they travel for these European tournaments every year throughout the summer, and they also have the Junior European Championships, Junior World Championships. So compared to an Australian athlete, they probably have 3 times as many games throughout the year, and they're of a relative high quality. I mean, they're playing against other top European nations, so it really is kind of hard to replicate that amount of gameplay that they do get over here.
Aaron,
Can I just,
sorry, John. What's the relationship between, say, your club coach and the Hungarian national coach? Do they speak?
Oh, it's a unique one because obviously they played, I mean, in my situation, those two played together on the national team and won an Olympics together, so they're quite good friends. So I don't know if it's unique to that exact situation, but they do collaborate with everything. So our training, when the league was cancelled, our training was kind of based on the national team program, and they always collaborate on what the training schedule is going to be like, when they're peaking for training loads and troughing, and when they're meant to be resting. So yeah, it's a collaboration between the clubs and the national team, especially in the top 2-3 clubs where most of the national players originate from.
Right.
Aaron, just jumping back to the juniors for a tick, you talked about the amount of games that they play as well. So let's just take the Hungarian club teams. Do they play other countries, teams from other countries also as a club team? So would Budapest play a Serbian club team?
Yeah, definitely. Even if you look at the Champions League finals last year, they held a junior tournament in collaboration. So in the mornings, all the junior clubs would be playing each other. Then in the afternoon, they would come and watch the men's Champions League finals. So there's definitely quite a few of those tournaments, especially in the summer. But yeah, obviously a lot of those teams lose a lot of players to the national team, but they still do run club competitions throughout Europe, and they're quite popular.
With that, Aaron, they don't always just play traditional water polo either. On Margaret Island, they sometimes have I think what is it, a 15-metre by 10-metre pool set up as well, where they play 5-a-side tournaments. I know in Croatia and on the coast, they have a lot of tournaments where they play in beach pools and those sorts of things. Can you give some idea about that?
Yeah, that's more the social side of the sport, but it definitely gets a big following, especially if you look at these coastal countries like Croatia and Montenegro. They run their beach league, which has actually in the last few years become incredibly popular. They even managed to sign a Red Bull deal, I believe, to broadcast some of it, and it's realistically amateur players playing in the ocean and just having a bit of fun. But the whole spectacle of being able to sit on the seaside and have a few drinks and watch a few guys throw a ball around and get behind your team is definitely advertising for a lot of people. So it's, I think that has picked up around the world. Even I believe Australia is doing the beach tours now and stuff like that. But that social aspect of water polo is definitely going to be important in growing the popularity of the sport in general.
So Aaron, how do you go, as you said, you played in Croatia, Hungary, Ghana Pro Reka. How does the language barrier affect you? Why the coach is giving a team plan? I know everyone speaks English in a roundabout way, but I've got no doubt when they're yelling and having to go and tell what to do, how do you understand?
I've been in Hungary long enough, so I understand now, but I guess the first few years are a bit tougher. But the season is that long that by the end of the season, there's not much to be told. I mean, everyone knows the tactics. No tactics really change, especially later in the season. So the only thing you can really be following is a certain number or something, or a certain style of defense, but you pretty much know every tactic the team has by the end of the season. So there's not that much to follow. The rest is just abuse, so you don't really need to listen anyway.
Aaron, we've got another question from the audience. Hi, Aaron. Forgive me if you've already been asked similar. What's the relationship between referees and clubs, coaches, players like in Europe? That's the first bit. And are referees involved in training sessions, player education, etc., or do you only see them at games?
I'll go start from the end of the question. The referees are involved in training sessions, but on a professional basis. So if we have a training game, we'll hire 2 or 3 Hungarian referees to come down and referee the game. Usually whenever we have a training game with any team around Europe, we'll actually employ professional referees to come down and watch it just to make a better standard of training. In general, though, they wouldn't have any involvement with any of the clubs outside of that, just due to biases where they don't want anyone being involved in a club and then later on down the track they end up refereeing. And the relationships between the clubs and the referees, a bit of a love-hate relationship. Everyone's trying to coerce the referees to like the clubs a bit more, but by the end of the games, the relationship's usually not that good. I mean, as things get heated, relationships tend to get a bit tough, regardless of their skill.
Probably the same everywhere in the world. Now,
Yeah.
I've got another question from you. Hey, Aaron, who would win this game, hypothetically? The 2012 Australian Olympic team or the 2016 team? Tough one.
I don't know. Half the team's the same, so yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. Maybe penalties. See who's better in goals. See if Salah's developed since then.
Hey, Aaron, so obviously, you know, very famous water polo wise, but you've, you know, water polo is not going to pay the bills, you know, in life. You've done some really amazing things outside of the sport, completing a number of degrees and things and set yourself up for life. Can you give, you know, and give everyone an idea of, you know, what you've actually done, you know, at university and schooling wise?
Yeah, well, I got into engineering at the start, but I pretty much, I graduated in December and then in December and then the next September I moved away to Europe. So did a semester of engineering and then realized you couldn't do that by correspondence. So I switched to a commerce degree in accounting and finance and finished that in my years in SEGET. And then recently, after a few years off and had a child and everything, went into more studies. So I completed an MBA at the University of New South Wales by correspondence as well. And now just registered 2 weeks ago to start a CFA just to keep busy while I'm over here. Otherwise it's a bit tedious playing water polo every day with not much on the side.
And business wise? I'll give you company a bit of a blur.
Yeah, I know. I just sold it. So no, I was running a bit of a bacon and egg burger store in Perth for a bit, but then I sold it to my sister and she's just sold it off to a third party now, and also been doing a bit of work with Tyler at FINA Sport, trying to get them distributed around Australia. And I think it's obviously a great initiative by Tyler, trying to support other Australian athletes, with most of the sales agents being current and former Australian Sharks players and Australian Stingers. So it's definitely the kind of businesses that help the sport and help the community.
And how important do you think it is, you know, education and those sorts of things, you know, aside from water polo? You know, you mentioned there that you also studied to, you know, keep your mind a bit active as well, not just water polo focused. You know, for a lot of kids, they want to be the Aaron Youngers of the world, but they just want to play like Aaron. They forget about, you know, study and life. Yeah,
definitely. I think, in all aspects of my life, the study's been important. Obviously, it's a stress reliever and a bit of a comfort knowing that I do have that education behind me. So when I do finish the sport, or if, at the end of the day, it's possible I get injured and can't play anymore, that I do have something to come back to and I can live a normal life. But also on top of that, it's been great along the side of my sport that outside of sport, I do have another world to go into. I don't need to focus on the sport 24/7. And I think that is an issue that a lot of players do have, especially in Europe when you're playing 60, 70 games with your club and then another 20, 30 with the national team. It can become a pretty stressful cycle, especially when you're expected to win day in, day out, that you need to kind of have an escape. You need to have a group outside of water polo you can socialise with, and to get away from water polo a bit. I think that study is not only aid you in your life, but it also can aid you in your sporting performance, that you do have that thing to mentally switch off with and focus on other things and realise that water polo is not everything in life, and there is other things you need to focus on.
So,
Aaron,
Aaron,
I think it's... Sorry, Danny.
Sorry, let's just go. Just a quick one for me. You're saying that when you do retire, Will you move back to Australia, or will you stay in Hungary, or will you split your time between both countries? Has that been spoken about?
Oh no, with my wife, we've already spoken that we will be moving back to Australia. It's just a matter of when, not if, realistically. But we've been saying we're moving back next year for the last 4 years now, so we'll see when that happens. It's in the plans.
Yeah, fair enough.
Aaron, it's really great to hear how well you've done with your studies, and you've set yourself up. And yeah, I know for a fact as well that if something to fall back on is so important, and you seem very well settled with your family. And I just want to ask now about your move to Pro Reco, which will happen when? In 6 weeks, did you say?
Yeah, the start of August. I mean, the Italian national team has a 2-month training camp now, so they're probably not going to join until late August. But as I'm on holiday at the moment, they've said just to come a bit earlier to get in a bit better shape before the rest of the team arrives.
I'll read you a quote from Maurizio Faluga, who was a very good player in his own right, who's the president of Pro Reco. And he said that the reason they got you was because of your versatility. And as we heard from Elvis and AJ, ranked, well, considered to be in the top 5 players at the moment in the world. When you were first chosen for the national team, and when we were playing in the lead-ups to London, I suppose your preferred position and the reason you were chosen was as a centre-back and that versatility. How do you see yourself now? What sort of role do you think that you'll play for Pro Reco?
I think, I mean, the way the water polo is being refereed and the way the game's developing, I think it's changing a bit, that players do need to have more of a bit of a broader role in the team, and to just be able to play on the left side or the right side or centre back or centre forward isn't really as viable as it used to be. So for the last few years in Europe, I've been playing left, I mean, both sides of the pool, bit of centre back and also a lot of driving centre forward. So I imagine I'm going to have a pretty similar role in Reco, and I think that's a lot of the weaknesses in other teams, is that they do have players that maybe they can attack, but they're not good at defending. And that's where you would use a player like me or someone in my situation where you can defend on them and then play second centre forward. So it's yeah, I don't know what I'll be playing. I'll see what the coach says when I get there, but I think it'll be a pretty broad role in that regard.
Aaron, because this is a referee show, how how do you like the newer rules, especially the penalty situations that Danny talked about before? And are the referees in Europe consistent?
No. Just to be honest, the refereeing from tournament to tournament, or even from the start of the season to end, the variation is pretty bad at sometimes. But I mean, that's not based on the referees. I think, I don't know, obviously as a player it's hard to say what the exact reason is, but it feels like going into tournaments the referees focus on certain aspects, but as a player and a team going into a tournament, it's hard to understand why they're focusing on these rules in this tournament, and the next tournament they're focusing on different rules. So it does create inconsistencies, I think, but it's also a part of the nature of the game. I mean, it's based in the water. You can't see much below the head, and it does make it hard for interpretation, and the water polo rules don't necessarily help in those regards as well to interpret it clear cut. So yeah, it's tough to say what the exact difference is between Australian and European referees or American, but in general, I think the issues they have in Australia, the issues they have in Europe is all pretty much similar. It's just the interpretation and the consistency from game to game is varying quite a bit. But I guess that's a part of the sport that players do need to recognise how the refereeing is going, and usually from the start of a tournament, that's a part of the team that you actually need to follow how the game's being interpreted in that tournament and adjust your game accordingly. And that's what makes good teams, that they can actually adjust on the go and follow the rules as they're being refereed.
Were there a lot more penalties blown when the new rule for giving a penalty when the ball's in the hand initially?
Yeah,
is that still happening?
Yeah, they went a bit crazy at the start, especially in the Hungarian league. It was a bit comical at some points, but then it's kind of died off a bit again to be a bit more tough in that space. But yeah, there's definitely more penalties across the board, but probably not as much as they were at the very start when it was fresh. But now it's yeah, still definitely more, and it's changed the way people defend a bit as well. I mean, that inside water is much more dangerous now, so it's allowing a lot more zone, and centre backs are less likely to try and sit in front as long as they used to.
So how do you compare the European referees with the Australian referees?
There's probably a difference in, I mean, obviously in Australia you don't get to referee that many top high-level games, and I think refereeing those high-level games where there is a lot of crowds is probably an important thing for a referee, because I think as it is for the players, it's very stressful playing in front of a big crowd, especially when abuse starts getting thrown. So besides the experience, there's not too much. I think, I mean, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, that just in Australia, they don't get put under that same pressure they would in Europe, and they don't get the opportunity to play in front of those big crowds, and they probably don't get abused as much as they do in Europe. They don't cop as much. They're a bit friendlier in Australia.
So, Aaron, do they have trouble getting referees and the progressive thing that getting the referees through the system in Europe? Like we've got a shortage.
Yeah, I think the thing is here they get looked after relatively well financially, and I mean it is a part-time job, so most of the referees are working somewhere and then come to the nights of the games. But I wouldn't say there's a shortage. Probably the biggest thing is that training and development is lacking in some places, and it's not a unified thing across Europe. It's up to each individual nation how they train and develop the referees. In Hungary, they set up like quite a large structure for the training and development of referees, which is still a bit, I mean, not everyone thinks it's the best development program yet, but that's the same everywhere. But somewhere like Serbia or that, now that they're having financial issues, they probably don't have the same blueprint they have in Hungary. And then from each country it's different. So it's hard to say what exactly is the most effective, because everyone's doing a different thing within Europe.
It's interesting, Aaron. We've seen some countries' referees are ex-national team players. Naumov is one that comes to mind from Russia. Are there any Hungarian referees or Europeans that you're aware of that have come through the national program, maybe have made the national team, or they've just fallen short and then turned to refereeing?
Well, Thomas Molnar is the head of the Referees Association in Hungary now, and he's the 3-time gold medalist for Hungary. So he's probably the main one. There is a few of the other players that do pick up a whistle occasionally, but they haven't really taken it to the next level. They don't do international games or anything. They might referee a few club games or the National League, but they haven't actually put up their hand to want to do it as a profession and step up to that next level to referee in Olympics or in World Championships or anything.
Yeah, Thomas Muller was refereeing, Aaron, if I remember rightly. I think he's now on the TWPC, so he's gone across.
He was a referee, and then he became the head of the Referees Association in Hungary. Then he's moved on to the FINA panel as well.
So Aaron, how much an effect has the pandemic had on the finances of the Federations 1 and Clubs 2?
Not so sure about the federations, to be honest. I guess that's up to each individual country and their agreements with the government. But for the clubs, it's been pretty disastrous. For the top level clubs like the Ferencváros, Pro and those kind of ones, they will survive this all right. But there's a lot of clubs that are, I mean, bankrupt or close to bankrupt now. Even Olympiacos, which was in the Champions League final the last 2 years, have said they might not even be able to play the Champions League. They've just got rid of all their foreigners, and yeah, there's a lot of clubs in dire financial straits at the moment, and even a lot of top level players that out there. There's Stefan Mitrovic, like top players internationally that aren't able to find clubs at the moment just because no one really has the money to invest. So it is, yeah, it's not a nice situation for water polo. I mean, of all the sports, there's been a lot of damage, but water polo is kind of one of the lower ones on the list, and it's probably the first one to go when the cost-cutting methods come in.
At least Aaron's got his contract
signed early,
which is a good thing. All right, how have you personally handled the postponement of the Olympics?
I mean, it was a bit disappointing at the start. Obviously, everyone had been preparing the last 3 years, and I think we had been preparing well in the last couple of years. We've had some good results, and everything was heading in the direction we wanted to. So to have it postponed was definitely a bit of a disappointment. But at the end of the day, I think we're quite a young team, and compared to our competitors, I think this is more of an advantage to us than it is for them. I mean, a lot of those players were about to retire. They had one more year, and then they were going to just play club level and leave from the national team. So I think if we use this time wisely and correctly, it should definitely give us a bit of an edge from where we might have been this year.
All right, I've got a question from the audience again. Hi, Aaron. Going back to the Australia versus USA-Croatia games in December and January. Geez, it seems like a lifetime ago. Yeah. What do you think are the main differences in refereeing between those games and in Europe and on the international stage?
Yeah, I don't think there was too much of a difference, to be honest. Obviously, the referees refereeing those games are refereeing the international ones as well. So I wouldn't say the difference was that big, to be honest. Though, as I remember, the American games were quite heavy, I believe. Off the top of my head, Croatia was probably a bit lighter, but in general, that's the kind of refereeing you can expect at any international event. It's, as I said, it does change tournament to tournament, but I wouldn't be surprised to experience that kind of refereeing in any international game or international tournament.
All right, and have you any thoughts on how we, Australia, can be more innovative than other countries in our preparation for Tokyo? We're a bit closer, same time zone, but can we be smarter?
It's definitely a hard one. It's obviously a conversation we've been having within the national team and with Elvis and everyone involved in the team is what's going to give us the edge over that period. But I think our probably biggest advantage is the lack of relative pressure we have to those European countries and also the ability to schedule as we need. I mean, here the national teams are kind of dictated by the clubs. You know, the clubs run the competitions for that 9 months and the players are at the will of the clubs during that period. Whereas in Australia, we have the full control of the players from now until the Olympics, so we're able to tailor their programs and schedules to best suit them to have the adequate recovery mentally and physically and just use that time the most effectively. So when we do rock up to the Olympics, we're not mentally fatigued, we're not physically fatigued, we're actually getting there at the peak. And I think that's probably our biggest advantage. I don't know what actual innovation you would call that, but I think it's probably one of our biggest strengths is that we do have the ability to tailor the calendar as we do like, and we don't have as much pressure and dictation from the clubs that they need to play this 9-month season and they need to be in the water every day playing these games. So we have more time to be together and also a better ability to control our schedules and those cycles.
I think one of the changes that COVID has enforced, and this is an example now, 12 months ago, we probably didn't have the know-how to set these sort of things up, but it was interesting hearing the AFL clubs talking about during the laydown period in COVID, to keep the players occupied, they gave them homework, we'd call it, where they'd watch games. And it meant that when the players came in for meetings, the meetings became a lot shorter and more direct. And you weren't wasting time going through stuff that maybe some players had already been through and some hadn't. So I think what COVID has done, if you look at a positive side of it, it's increased our accessibility and our know-how of technology and be able to use that effectively.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And we've been sent out videos regarding certain aspects of our game which players have been expected to watch and been discussing. So I think that is definitely something we will need to use over this period, because we're going to have 4 players over in Europe over this next year. So being able to integrate them into the team as much as possible in that period will be important. And I think the technology available now definitely helps facilitate that.
Aaron, you talk about scheduling and those sorts of things. What does a heavy game week look like for you, and what does a lighter game week, or an easier game, or just a Saturday game? What does the week look like in preparation?
It depends on what we have, but a normal week would be either you play Tuesday, Friday, or Wednesday, Saturday. So the first half of the season, you either play Wednesday, Saturday, and then the second half you'd play Tuesday, Friday, or vice versa. So that would be the standard schedule of a week, but that can go on for months where you're playing 2 games a week, which is the tiring bit of it. The individual week doesn't look so bad, but when you put 20 of them together, it gets pretty tiring. And probably best case scenario is you just don't have a game that weekend. You would train Friday morning and then you would see each other again Monday, trying to use that time to rest and recuperate properly.
Is there a lot of your time spent during the season on tactics, against the team you're playing, or is it, coming up, or is it, you'll factor in that, FTC can beat this team by 20 goals, so we'll just work through this week? What does it look like?
Because there's so many games, we try and rest players periodically throughout the season. So in those games where we would win by 20 goals, we try and sit the old players out and rotate them accordingly. But yeah, definitely throughout the season, the main focus is tactics and just making those tactics so automated that realistically by the end of the season, there's not much thinking that needs to be done. It's just a thing you do. So yeah, a large part of that is tactics, and the others is just going through the fitness cycles of when you need a peak and trough and when you need that rest and when you need to be up. So yeah, definitely.
Aaron, all of Hungary is probably still in a period of mourning over the passing of Tibor Benedict, and on the same day, Georgi Karpati. What was your relationship with Tibor? Did you know him personally, and did he have any influence on you? And what's the mood around Hungary at the moment with the passing of both of those?
Yeah, well, Karpati was involved with Ferencváros for most of his career, so it was a big mourning period for the club, but also obviously the coach of Ferencváros, Zsolt Varga, was a player played with Benedict his whole career, and pretty much most of the players I played with Benedict at some point. So it was a pretty dark period for everyone, and obviously devastating news for someone so young. He had been fighting the cancer for 2 years, so it was kind of news everyone knew about, and everyone was kind of making their peace within that period, but it was still a shock for everyone when it happened. And even through that 2 years, he was working with Whitehouse, still coaching, so we were in contact with him on a regular basis. Obviously, the two Budapest teams that kind of go together the most, so we were very close in that regard. But yeah, it was definitely devastating news for everyone, and I think it's been a hard couple of weeks since then still.
Yeah, it's tragic news. And just with Karpati, he was in Melbourne in the early 80s, and Danny and I both played state team with Georgie, so when the Hungarians were coming out. So yeah, we had a close relationship with him, and obviously as a player I played against Benedict. So yeah, it was shocking to hear both of them passing on the same day, basically.
So Aaron, did I see maybe something on Facebook where it looked like there was thousands of people on Margaret Island after the death of Tibor? Was that how it was?
Yeah, definitely. It was packed all the way up to the bridge. There was a line, just people coming to pay their respects. And even in the following few days, there was people coming through non-stop. So definitely throughout the entire country, it was felt. So they had a private funeral, as I know, but that was the public memorial, and it was massive. And you could see how popular it was amongst everyone when you saw the pictures, and not also being there, that how many people came to pay their respects, even in and outside of water polo.
All right, Aaron, some really tough questions for you now. The usual questions we have I suppose, for all guests. The best player you've played with or against, or both, maybe. Who's the best player you've played with, and who's the best player you've played against?
I don't know. I read these questions before, and I couldn't think of an answer for any of them, which was a bit disappointing. But there's so many players at that top level that it's hard to say which one's tough, like the best or the toughest. But obviously, I had a pretty good opportunity to play with some amazing players throughout my career. Obviously, played with Prolanovic and Stanisłaga and quite a few amazing players. Probably to play against in an attacking style, Ivovic would probably be one of the best one-on-one defenders I've played against. But yeah, it's hard to say an exact name. Reece and AJ are probably the most annoying to play on. So. And
as a team, who's the toughest country you've had to come up against?
Probably the toughest, and I think the only team we haven't beat yet is Serbia. I think they're probably the I mean, as a team and their structure and the way they work together has probably been the toughest for us. I mean, we've managed to beat Croatia and most of the other teams now, but yeah, I think Serbia's definitely been the hardest.
And aside from Foxy and myself, who's the best coach you've had?
Yeah, again, I was thinking about this one, and obviously from whatever I was 14 till now, it's hard to say who's the best coach I've had, because obviously at different stages of a career you need different things, and I've been lucky enough to have good coaches throughout my whole career, which have been invaluable in that part of my development. So it's hard to say which one's the best. Obviously, we are still with Elvis at the moment, but I won 2 Champions League with 2 different coaches, plus I developed with 2-3 different coaches. Obviously, I had Foxy when I was a younger player developing, you in Perth, Govalenko in Perth as well. So it's hard to say which one was the best, but all of them were invaluable at that part of my career and development.
Phil, do you want to ask the next one?
Who's the best referee you've ever seen, Aaron? Without, excluding Danny, of course.
To be honest, not really. Sorry, I think my internet's getting a bit bad. Yeah, I don't really focus on the referees too much. The only ones I know are the ones I don't like. So the ones I don't know the names of are probably the best ones.
Right. Because we're thinking of getting him on the program at some stage. How do you rate Margetta?
He's pretty good. He's, I mean, obviously one of the most professional referees out there. He's probably been around, I mean, so with Danny, they've been around for a long time and knows the game and knows how to read the mood and doesn't get caught up in the with the teams and the crowds and that kind of thing. So yeah, he's definitely a very smooth operator and good referee most of the time.
2 more questions. Best pool you played in? Best pool you played in Australia, then the best pool in Europe.
It won't be doing it.
No, Picton Bars down in Fremantle. That'll be my favourite, I think. Down on the river, can't beat that.
Yeah, I'd agree for West Australia. Yeah. And do you watch much of the women's water polo? If you can hear me,
too much, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so we won't ask you who's the best female player you've seen.
Just did.
Yeah.
Just did. Yeah. All right, that just about takes us out. Aaron, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the show. We do appreciate the time that you've afforded to us, and it's been fantastic. It'd be great to have you on again at a later date. And thank you once again.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Happy to come on.
Fantastic. There he is, the Australian captain, I should say, the men's team captain, Aaron Younger, speaking to us from Budapest in Hungary. And boys, that was very, very edifying and good, wasn't it, Phil?
It was excellent. Yeah, excellent. Great to see we can get someone from overseas on the program, which probably leads me to the next question. Who have we got for the next program?
Who have we got for the next program? And it is somebody from overseas.
It is. It's from the USA. We're going to talk to Adam Krikorian. We'll probably be on a different time slot. We will let everyone know when we're going to do it, but it will definitely be on the Australian website so everyone can tune in and look at it. But Adam's agreed to come on, and hopefully it'll be a great interview.
I don't think he's got any trouble stringing 2 words together, believe me.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I can't wait for that one. That's going to be an absolute beauty. Gentlemen, that just about takes us out. Appreciate your input today. Paul, Danny, Phil, Aaron's still there with us. John, thank you very much. And we will see you next time with Aaron Krikorian, the USA women's coach, on The Whistleblower. See you then.